If you are more in love with the idea of a person than with the reality of who they are, you might be trapped in a state known as limerence. It feels like the most intense romantic connection you have ever experienced. You might call it a soulmate connection or love at first sight, but often, if you look closely at the dynamic, there is very little actual relationship taking place. Instead, there is a lot of thinking, a lot of analyzing, and a lot of waiting. You might find that the highest points of your week are not when you are with this person, but when you are daydreaming about them. We need to talk about why this happens. There is a specific psychological mechanism behind this intense longing. It is not necessarily a sign that you have found the one. In fact, that overwhelming pull often signals that your attachment system has been activated by uncertainty, not by safety. This is a state of cognitive obsession that can take over your life, impacting your work, your sleep, and your emotional stability. The good news is that this is not a character flaw. It is a biological state that we can map out, understand, and eventually step out of. Let us begin by defining what is actually happening in your brain during this cycle. The term limerence was coined by psychologist Dorothy Tenov in the late 70s. She used it to describe an involuntary state of mind which results from a romantic attraction to another person. The key word here is involuntary. You do not choose to feel this way. It feels like it is happening to you, like a fever. The primary symptom is intrusive thinking. You wake up and they are the first thought in your mind. You go to sleep and you are rehearsing conversations with them. Throughout the day, a percentage of your brain power is constantly running a background program dedicated to them. This cycle usually starts with what is called the glimmer. This is a moment where the other person provides a small cue that you interpret as special promise. It might be prolonged eye contact, a specific compliment, or a moment of shared vulnerability. For a person prone to limerence, this cue becomes the seed of a massive fantasy structure. You take that one moment and you expand it. You begin to project qualities onto this person that you have not actually witnessed. You assume they are kind, deep, or perfectly compatible with you, even if you have only known them for a week. The engine that keeps limerence running is not love. The engine is uncertainty. If this person were totally available, boring, and predictable, the limerence would likely fade. Limerence thrives on the question mark. Does he like me? Did that text mean she is interested? Why did they pull away yesterday? This uncertainty triggers a massive release of dopamine in the brain. It is the same biological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When you pull the lever on a slot machine, you do not know if you will win or lose. That tension creates a chemical rush. When you are waiting for a text from a limerent object, you are pulling the lever. The brain interprets this anxiety as passion. You feel a tightness in your chest and a flutter in your stomach. You can't eat. You feel hyper-alert. Cultural narratives tell us that this physical distress is a sign of true love. Movies and songs reinforce the idea that love should be an agonizing roller coaster. However, from a psychological perspective, this is a stress response. Your nervous system is in a state of high alert because it does not feel safe. You are chasing the person to resolve the anxiety, hoping that their validation will calm you down. This leads us to the cycle of highs and lows. When you get the validation, the text comes in, or they smile at you, you get a euphoric high. It feels better than anything else in your life. This reinforces the loop. You become willing to endure weeks of silence or ambivalence just to get that one hit of validation again. This is known as intermittent reinforcement. And it is the most powerful way to create an emotional bond that is hard to break. It is difficult to walk away because you are always waiting for the good version of them to return. Let's look at how this manifests in your daily behavior. One of the most common signs is the replay loop. You might spend hours dissecting a 10-minute conversation. You analyze their tone of voice, their body language, and their word choice, looking for evidence that they feel the same way. You might screenshot their messages and send them to friends, asking for their interpretation. This is an attempt to gain control over an uncontrollable situation. You believe that if you can just crack the code of their behavior, you can make them love you. Another major symptom is the ignoring of red flags. In a limerent state, you engage in a process called crystallization. You polish the image of this person until they shine like a diamond. If they are rude to a waiter, you tell yourself they are just having a bad day. If they are inconsistent with communication, you tell yourself they are just busy or afraid of intimacy. You become the lawyer for their bad behavior. You defend them against your own intuition. The reality of who they are is often quite different from the fantasy version you have built in your mind, but you are so invested in the potential that you ignore the reality. There is also a profound fear of rejection that prevents you from asking for clarity. You might stay in a vague situationship for months or even years because you are terrified to ask, "What are we?" You sense that asking the question might break the spell. You prefer the torture of hope to the finality of rejection. This keeps you in a state of suspended animation. You are not really living your life. You are waiting for your life to begin when this person finally chooses you. It is important to understand that limerence is often about you, not them. Often, the limerent object acts as a distraction from our own pain or emptiness. If you are obsessing about them, you do not have to think about your own career dissatisfaction, your past trauma, or your own loneliness. They become a drug that numbs you to your own reality. The intensity of the longing fills up the empty spaces in your internal world. This is why limerence often strikes when we are feeling low, bored, or in transition. Eventually, there is usually a crash. This happens when the person either rejects you outright or, ironically, when they become a real human being. Sometimes, if the limerent object actually reciprocates and becomes a steady partner, the ick sets in. Suddenly, they are not a magical savior. They are just a person who chews loudly or has annoying habits. The fantasy collapses under the weight of reality. You might find yourself suddenly losing interest because the source of the dopamine, the uncertainty and the chase, is gone. This can be confusing as you spent so much time wanting them, but you didn't want the person, you wanted the high. So how do we begin to step out of this loop? The first step is to recognize that what you are feeling is not a directive from the universe to pursue this person. It is a chemical state. You have to stop trusting the intensity. Just because you feel a magnetic pull does not mean you should follow it. In fact, high intensity is often a sign to pause and evaluate. We need to employ some safe practices to ground you back in reality. A powerful tool is the reality checklist. When you are in limerence, your brain is biased to remember only the good moments. You need to create an external record of the truth. Take a piece of paper and make 2 columns. On one side, write down your feelings and fantasies. On the other side, write down their concrete actions. For example, your feeling might be, "We have a deep spiritual connection." The action column might say, "He hasn't asked me a question about myself in 3 weeks." Your feeling might be, "She is just scared of how much she likes me." The action column might say, "She canceled our date last minute to go out with friends." Seeing the disparity between your internal narrative and the external facts can be painful, but it is necessary to break the spell. Another practice is to interrupt the obsessive loop with redirection. Limerence is a huge amount of mental energy. It is creative energy gone wrong. Instead of trying to just stop thinking about them, which is nearly impossible, try to move that energy. When the urge to check their social media hits, physically stand up and change your environment. Pour that obsessive focus into a project, a workout, or a complex task. You are trying to retrain your brain that the dopamine hit comes from your own achievements, not from their attention. You must also practice strict boundaries with the source of the addiction. In the height of limerence, staying friends is usually not possible. It keeps the wound open. You might need a period of no contact to let your neurochemistry reset. This includes digital no contact. Stalking their online presence gives you microdoses of the drug and resets your withdrawal clock. You have to starve the limerence to let it fade. As you heal, you will likely experience withdrawal. You will feel bored. You will feel a void where the obsession used to be. This is actually a sign of progress. That boredom is the space where real life happens. It is the space where you can begin to build a life that you don't need to escape from. The ultimate takeaway here is to reframe your understanding of love. Healthy love often feels boring to a nervous system that is used to chaos. Secure love is not a cliffhanger. It is not a mystery to be solved. It is reliable. It is consistent. It feels like a slow, steady warmth rather than a burning fire. If you are used to the roller coaster, stability can feel like indifference. You might think, "I don't feel a spark," when what you actually don't feel is anxiety. Learning to appreciate the boredom of safety is a major part of healing. You are retraining your palate to enjoy a nutritious meal instead of just craving the sugar rush. Ask yourself this question as you move forward. Do you want a partner, or do you want a fantasy? A fantasy remains perfect because it is never tested. A partner will disappoint you, they will be mundane, but they will be real. The goal is to build a connection that can survive a Tuesday night on the sofa, not just a connection that lives in the high drama of the chase. You deserve a love that is present, tangible, and safe, not one that exists entirely in the waiting room of your mind.